story of Esther. This story is packed with courage, destiny, and divine timing. It's about a young woman who rises from obscurity to becoming a queen and risks everything to save her people. She is called Esther. Esther was just an ordinary girl, an orphan raised by her cousin Mordecai in the heart of Persia, far from her ancestors' homeland. But her life was about to change in ways she never imagined. When Queen Vashti disobeyed King Xerxes, she was banished, and the king needed a new queen. A decree went out. Every beautiful young woman in the empire was to be brought to the palace. Esther was one of them, but she had a secret. She was Jewish. And Mordecai warned her, "Don't tell anyone where you come from." Esther entered the palace, unsure and afraid. But there was something about her, grace, kindness, and favor. The palace officials noticed, and when she finally stood before the king, his heart was moved. "She's the one," King Xerxes declared. Esther became queen, but no one knew her true identity. While Esther settled into her new role, trouble was brewing in the shadows. Enter Haman, a powerful official, arrogant and hungry for respect. The king promoted him, and everywhere Haman went, people bowed low. Everyone except Mordecai. Mordecai refused to bow because he served God alone. Haman burned with rage, but he didn't just want revenge on Mordecai. He wanted to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews. Haman went to the king with a plan. "There are people in your kingdom who don't follow your laws. They're dangerous. Let me deal with them." King Xerxes, trusting Haman, handed him his signet ring, sealing the decree. The date was set. In 1 year, all the Jews would be annihilated. When Mordecai heard the news, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and wept in the city streets. Esther heard about it and sent messengers to find out what was wrong. Mordecai's message was clear. "You must go to the king and beg for our lives." But Esther hesitated. "No one can approach the king without being summoned," she said. "If I do, I could be killed." Mordecai's reply pierced her heart. "Don't think you'll escape this, Esther. Who knows? Perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this." Esther took a deep breath. She realized her life wasn't just about wearing a crown or living in luxury. She had a purpose. "If I perish, I perish," she whispered. She called for a 3-day fast. No food, no water. She and all the Jews of Susa would seek God's favor. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes. Her heart pounded as she approached the throne room. The law was clear. If the king didn't extend his golden scepter, she would be executed on the spot. As the massive doors opened, the room fell silent. King Xerxes looked up. Esther stood tall, her face calm but her heart racing. Moments stretched like eternity. Then, the king smiled. He extended his golden scepter. "What is it, Queen Esther? Ask anything, even up to half my kingdom." But Esther was wise. She didn't rush. She invited the king and Haman to a special banquet. At the banquet, the king repeated his question. But Esther simply invited them to another banquet the next day. She was waiting for the perfect moment. That night, Haman left the banquet full of pride. But when he saw Mordecai refusing to bow again, his rage boiled over. He went home and built 75-foot-tall gallows to execute Mordecai. But God was working behind the scenes. That same night, the king couldn't sleep. He asked for the royal records to be read to him. As they read, the king realized something. Mordecai had once saved his life from an assassination plot, but he was never rewarded. The next morning, Haman entered the court, ready to ask for Mordecai's execution. But before he could speak, the king asked, "Haman, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Haman, thinking the king was talking about him, said, "Dress him in royal robes, put him on the king's horse, and parade him through the city, shouting, 'This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor.'" The king smiled. "Excellent. Do that for Mordecai." Haman's face fell. He was forced to honor the very man he hated. At the second banquet, the king asked again, "What is your request, Queen Esther?" Esther took a deep breath. "If I have found favor in your eyes, O king, spare my life and the lives of my people, for we have been sold to be destroyed." The king's face darkened. Who would dare do such a thing? Esther turned, pointing. "This wicked man, Haman." Haman's blood drained from his face. The king, enraged, stormed out. Haman begged Esther for his life. But when the king returned and saw Haman falling at the queen's feet, he shouted, "Will he even assault the queen in my presence?" Haman was dragged out and executed, on the very gallows he built for Mordecai. But the danger wasn't over. The decree to destroy the Jews was still in place. Esther once again approached the king, and this time, he issued a new decree. the Jews could defend themselves. When the day of the attack came, the Jews were ready. They triumphed over their enemies, and Mordecai was elevated to a position of power, second only to the king. The Jewish people celebrated their deliverance with a new festival, Purim, to remember how God had saved them through the courage of a young queen. You are here for a purpose. Esther's story isn't just about a queen in a palace. It's about each of us. Sometimes life puts us in uncomfortable, unexpected places. We may feel unprepared or afraid, but God places us where we are for a reason. Who knows? You might be in your situation for such a time as this. When life gets tough, when you're faced with difficult decisions, remember Esther's courage. If you believe God has a purpose for your life, type Amen in the comments.